Welcome to episode two of Two Standard Individuals. My name is Scott. I'm a standard individual. This is Dave over this way. He's
Oh,
also a standard individual. Together, we are two standard individuals. Thank you for tuning in. Very exciting show. This is something that we do probably weekly. We kind of debate on who the top five is in many different fashions. Best top five best big man, top five best point guard. So today we're doing top five all time. This is something that we definitely go back and forth with. We might get into a fight here. This might be the end of two standard individuals.
that's right.
Let's see. Why not, right? So we're gonna go from number five to number one in that order, and kind of let each other talk, maybe debate it after each other says their list, say a little bit of why we would like that person for that spot, and then go from there. So without further ado, Dave, I
Get
am
rolling.
going to let you go because I'm going to change your mind on your top five.
Unfortunately, that will not happen. But now, what do you want? Now, do you want to do what, like five, and then you go five, or you want me to just go five, four, three, two, one, and then you do five up?
You do five, four, three, two, one.
All right, excellent. All right, so actually, number five for me was actually probably the most debatable. I mean, you know what it is like. After Scott and I have talked many times over the years on this, and of course, it changes over the course of time a little bit. You know, with someone like LeBron and Kobe, and when these guys start to get up there in age or retire. So, for me, there's always like a certain group that you almost could remix the order, and I probably won't complain too much. My number one is, not debatable, but for the sake of this. So number five, though, I had to go Wilt Chamberlain. This was a struggle between a few others that it was just so close and it was just so hard. And my biggest reasons really are that he's statistically the most dominant sports figure ever, period. I mean, he has so many records that won't be broken, and so many are by such a wide margin. I mean, forget the 100-point game, which is obviously insane, especially for a time of not having maybe 3-point range. Someone may argue, he's a bigger guy, and that was, you're easier to be more dominant when you're big. But, the fact that he actually also had 55 rebounds in a single game against the opposing center, which was Bill Russell, one of the all-time great players too. So, on top of that, he does have 2 championships, 4 MVPs. I think seven scoring titles. I was almost going to say 6, 7 scoring titles, as I'm checking here on Basketball Reference. And the fact is that, maybe, without the Celtics during that era, he would have had more championships. The reality is Bill Russell and that team is one of the all-time greatest franchise teams ever in any sport. So the fact that he was always competing against them, he was just always competing against a better team. Some people may debate whether he was always chasing stats. I mean, that can be debatable. But right here at this number 5 pick, he is just one of the all-time most dominant sports figures ever. So I have to put him here at number 5. Number 4. This is another tough one, so I had to go back and forth. But I'm going to actually go Bill Russell. So the reason why Russell gets the nod over Wilt in this case is simple. It's a team game, and your main course of going through your time is winning, and that's what he did. He also won as their best player. I know it wasn't maybe as dominant as like best player when sometimes Kobe wins a championship with Paul Gasol and Lamar Odom, where Kobe's overly clearly the most dominant player on the team, and it's not even close. Russell had a few teammates where you could say like, okay, Russell is the best, but there's a few teammates that are kind of close behind. But Russell has 11 championships in 13 years. And, that record will never be broken. He is the winningest figure in all of sports. So you kind of pair that with the fact that I do look at it as a team sport, which is why I'm giving him that slight nod above Wilt. But on top of that, he's a 5-time MVP, an 11-time NBA champ, obviously, as I said, but 11-time All-NBA player. So in the 13 years he's in the league, he's an 11-time All-NBA. He's in 12 All-Stars. And the fact is, it's so hard to compete against a team maybe like that, but he was clearly the catalyst of that team. A lot of people, even though give Red Auerbach the nod of, being the coach that coordinates it all, a lot of people believe, though, it really started with Bill Russell on their famous fast break, which is kind of a lot of modern offenses, eventually get based off of that. So for me, he's all-time winner. I didn't talk about Wilt's stats, which I should have. That just did him a disservice. But for Bill Russell, just to give you an example, he was still 15 points per game, 22.5 rebounds per game, and 4.3 assists. So even though he is not as scoring dominant as Wilt, he was every bit of rebounding and defensively dominant, probably even better defensively. Wilt was 30 points a game and 22.9 points, so and then 4.4 assists. So as you can see, between the two, Wilt is definitely the better scorer. Bill Russell was just the better winner, and maybe it's a team part, but I think Bill Russell also knew where he could sacrifice for his game to get there. So number 3, we're going to go LeBron James. This is, as we go up through the order, if someone could fight me a little on the order of these, I wouldn't, cry too much here, but LeBron, who's still going strong, and this is really why he's here, and maybe he'll go a little higher later. I'm not sure. Longevity, he probably has over almost any other player. I mean, you can argue, Kareem or Tim Duncan, obviously, who had awesome longevity through the career. But the dominance that LeBron James has on the court in almost every way, and I would say the only debatable way maybe is just defense. He wasn't the most defensively imposing player, but offensively, he kind of just has one of the best well-rounded games. He can score, he can pass. He is the best small forward of all time, above Julius Erving, Larry Bird, whoever else is there. He is a 4-time MVP, 3-time champ, and one of those championships coming against the famous 73-win Gold State Warriors. So I think there's no question that he is cementing a legacy like no other maybe athlete in the history of sports on the longevity scale, where he's still going strong, and he has one of his best seasons just this past year with the Lakers. I know they couldn't quite finish it, and we will hopefully see the end of that. But to be that good at such a I won't say like a veteran age, if we want to call it nicely, is very hard to come by. But statistically, it is still a monster. 27 points a game, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, 50% from the field. The second highest PER of any players behind Michael Jordan. So, it just in an era where, he could score and distribute the ball and also help his team win. We know famously he's brought, a few slightly sluggish teams far into the playoffs, even into the finals the one year, and I know they got swept that one year by Spurs, but you couldn't argue that he is the catalyst behind that winning team. So LeBron, he makes his debut here at number 3. We will see if he goes higher by the time he retires. Number 2 is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So Kareem, this, I've probably seen Kareem as one of the most debated people, along with the LeBron versus Jordan, and then Kareem gets thrown into this mix because a lot of people are like, what about Kareem? And I notice sometimes older players do put Kareem as their greatest player of all time, which does make me, tune in more to what they have to say. Most famously, one of my all-time favorite players that I didn't really see growing up necessarily is Julius Erving, who thinks to this day that Kareem is the best player ever. But for good reason. I think Kareem, not just, you could say, he has the most, unblockable shot. He's the all-time scoring leader, all those kinds of things. But that also goes to his longevity. For playing as long as he did and being a 19-time All-Star almost sounds unfathomable. He's 15-time All-NBA, 11-time All-Defensive Team. He has 6 NBA championships. He also is a champ in the blocks category 4 different times, which is crazy. Other than Akeem Olajuwon, I believe, is one of the few that get there. Same with Dikembe Mutombo. And 6-time MVP. And that's the most, obviously, in NBA history. So for a guy being that valuable and being able to really do everything on the court, he is one of the best defensive players of all time, one of the best offensive players of all time. But he falls short of number 1 based on one minor thing. And, again, it's not to take away from him, but, at one point in his career, I would say he's without question greatest player on the team and the main catalyst driving it. In the later years with the Lakers, I would say it's Magic Johnson that ends up being actually the true coordinator of that team. Not to say that Kareem is any less of a player, but that he had a better winning team around him at that time, which is what I think leaves him at this number 2 spot, which is still amazing, but falls short, like every other player ever in history. Chicago Bulls legend, Kirk Heinrich. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, it's Michael Jordan. So Michael Jordan, it's hard to say where to start, without, getting too ramped up here, but he's obviously a 5-time MVP, 6-time champion, which he has 2 3-peats, which I do want to speak a little on. So I know in one of his, I saw a debate about, him, what if he never left for baseball? If he never left for baseball, people were like, oh, he would have had 8 championships. And you really can't say that. I mean, it's like I may think he did, but someone else could debate otherwise. Got a lot of people in the background, but so what I like to think is that what makes it almost similarly just as great but different is the fact that he left the game for 2 years to play Major League Baseball, comes back and just keeps winning. And there's no question in his era, he is the most dominant player of that era, no question. I think a lot of times if we wanted to single out dominant players of certain eras, LeBron, Kobe kind of in there, and then you can go Jordan, you go Larry and Magic, all these kind of things. There's the next best player in Jordan's era is nowhere close to Jordan, which is where I think sometimes I also look at, if you try to judge somewhat fairly on the GOAT conversation, is you got to kind of sometimes judge them relative to their era as well. So it's very difficult to say, Allen Iverson is better than Bob Cousy, because it's so different of eras. The ball handling and everything else is so different. It's hard to really compare it. It's almost apples and oranges. So sometimes I look at it, where were they in their era? And Michael Jordan was untouchable. Now, a lot of people bring up, which I will bring up real quick, is some advanced stats. And I won't go real far into this, but one of the biggest ones is the PER, which is your efficiency rating. Michael Jordan, for both his career as a season and the playoffs, is first. He is number one in PER in season and playoffs his entire career out of anyone in basketball. Additionally, he ranks first in win shares, season and playoffs, in box plus minus, season and playoffs, and the value over player replacement, meaning that, who would replace him off the bench? How valuable is he, versus the replacement player? He also ranks first in both categories. So I look at him as just statistically dominant, obviously not quite in maybe the Wilt Chamberlain sense, but as a guard, he's got the highest points per game average efficiently, by the way, scoring 30 points a game, still with 6 rebounds, 5 assists. And, I just look at all the things he brought to the table. Now, what I like to say is what really makes him better than LeBron when people use these comparisons, and this is where Kareem's close. That's why, I mentioned the defense part, is that Michael Jordan was one of the best defensive players in his era, if not, ever. He's one of the few times a guard has ever won a defensive player of the year. Gary Payton was the other. And so that's where I kind of feel like LeBron right now takes a few steps behind a few players because he's amazing offensively, defense good, and at the prime of his career, kind of not so great as time went on. This last year he was good actually, but Michael Jordan has been dominant defensively, offensively his entire career. So not just to say he's best two-way player of all time, because we all know he's the GOAT. It's not a conversation. Scott, I'll see you later. We'll meet up for some coffee.
All right. Well, that's it for two standard. No.
Yeah.
Great list.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with all your reasoning, and I'm not gonna. I don't think I'm gonna bash you, but
no, it's good. I have a feeling you'll have a very interesting list.
Yes, my list.
Maybe
I think
you
you're gonna
think
be.
will convince me.
I think everybody's gonna be kind of surprised about, especially you, and it's. I'll just let it speak for itself.
Sure,
Right,
sure.
So I'll start with number 5. Obviously, that's what we're doing. So we got Magic Irving Johnson. That's who I got for my number 5. So some of these stats might be a little redundant, but I'm just going to run through them. 79, 80, all rookie. He was 12-time All-Star. He played 13 years in the league, so 12 times out of 13, not bad. He is the 4-time. Was a 4-time assist champ, 2-time steal champ, so defensively on the ball too. 10-time All NBA team recipient award, and 2-time All-Star MVP. He was a 5-time NBA champ. He was a 3-time league MVP and 3-time finals MVP. He's pioneer of the point forward, as I would say. Not because he played forward, but because he was a big guy and he played the point guard, which kind of led to other guards down the line, a la LeBron James. He is a point guard. I don't care what anybody says. And, Ben Simmons, and you can name others, but I'll just name those two because they're probably some of the best that can do it right now. So Magic also beat HIV, so that's pretty big up there. All joking aside, though, he did overcome a lot of adversity to come back and play at a high level with the Olympics and everything, to overcome all of that scrutiny and everything, and be a true human and look forward for that type of disease and illness that other people may have. So he's a great guy. He deserves to be in the top 5 list, I think. My number 4 is Kobe Bean Bryant. Uh, God rest his soul. Lost him this year. But he deserves to be on this list as well. The 96 97 All Rookie Team, 18-time All Star. He played 20 years in the league. He was a 2-time scoring champ, 15-time All NBA, 12-time All Defense, which is pretty huge for Kobe considering that people said that he didn't play defense. 4-time All Star MVP. He was a league MVP 1 time, 5-time NBA champ, 2-time NBA Finals. He does get an asterisk for one of those because he did share one of those with Shaq. So, but amazing player, both sides of the ball. He's, Kobe mentality. He just, the second coming of Jordan for sure. And he played as a 18-year-old kid, and he made it 20 years and did all that. How many players do you know of and can speak on the top of your head that have played that high of a level for that long? I would, LeBron is the only other one that I can, really speak on. There's not too many others. Um, there are others, of course, but they're not on my list. All right, number 3, Michael Jordan. So this is going to surprise Dave, but here's his stats. He's the 84 year Rookie of the Year. He was All Rookie Team, 3-time Steal Champ, that great defense, 10-time Scoring Champ, better on offense, 11-time All-Star MVP, All NBA. I'm sorry, 11-time All NBA, 9-time All Defense. That defense coming into play again, and he was the 87-88 Defensive Player of the Year. 14-time All-Star. He played 15 years in the league, and remember he played for Washington. 3-time All-Star MVP. He was a 5-time MVP total. He has 6 NBA championships and 6 NBA Finals MVPs. So every time he's been there, he has won the MVP, and not only that, but he won the championship. So he's there 15 years. He's got all those All Stars, 6 rings, but he didn't make it some of those years. So my number 2 is LeBron James. He's the 03-04 Rookie of the Year, All Rookie Team as well. 07-08 Scoring Champ, 6-time All Defense. They say LeBron doesn't play defense, but he's won All Defense 6 times. 15-time All-Star appearances for LeBron in 17 years. 4-time League MVP, 3-time All-Star MVP. He has 3 championships. 3 in all those times he's won MVP. He's been the best team, a best player on the best team that year. So the reason why he's on my number 2 is that he has only missed the playoffs twice in his 17 years. It's huge, staggering, because there's been some rough Cleveland teams that he has drug into the playoffs and deep into the playoffs as well. And besides his second year in the league, he has taken his team to the playoffs 13 consecutive years. Last year in LA was the end of that streak, and that also ended his 8 consecutive trips to the finals. So that's like probably my biggest argument above Michael Jordan for Michael Jordan and LeBron to be in those positions that they are, is because LeBron has just gone to 8. Now, again, he didn't win all 8 of those. He's won 3. But if you're not in it, you can't win it. And, if Michael maybe would have made it to more championships, maybe he would have won more. but he didn't make it there. So that's why I put him, LeBron, above Michael Jordan. Now, my number one is Bill Russell. Dave has him a little low on the list, but you'll see why I have him at number one. He's a 12-time All-Star. He is 11-time All-NBA, 4-time total NBA rebound champ, 1-time All-Defense, 5-time MVP, 11-time he has won an NBA championship. And he was also an All-Star MVP once. So he went to the finals 12 times, 12 NBA appearances. He won 11, and he played only 13 years in the league. So he is 11 for 13 total. That is a huge accomplishment. It is a team sport, but he definitely was the pinnacle to his team winning those championships. If it wasn't for him, I don't think those teams make it deep into the playoffs or even an NBA championship. So, Bill Russell, when he goes to put his rings on, he has to put an extra one on a different finger, double up, so that he can wear all of his championship rings. No other player ever has, nor will they probably ever will come to that feat. So not only I could go through the stats and throw those out there, but the championships and everything like that, put them above everybody and on my list. So that being said, Dave, what do you got to say about my list?
I like your list. So let's start actually kind of towards the bottom. So when I had Wilt, it was my number 5, and I wrestled. Really was between Wilt, Larry, Magic, and Kobe, and it was very difficult, to really decide, who to put in, because a lot of times for me, if I was going by players, I liked more, I would easily put Bird, Magic, or Kobe ahead of Wilt. Not that I disliked Wilt, it's just I love Magic, Bird, and Kobe so much. Especially Kobe was probably one of the most dominant players in the era that we really not like traditionally started truly watching, following statistics, playing basketball, things like that. So people like you and I can obviously relate to Kobe. You know what I mean? Yeah, of course, in our playing abilities, obviously.
Kobe.
So yeah, so. But so that was very difficult. So if you were going to say slide Magic in, and I was to move Wilt back, that would not bother me at all. The one thing I'll definitely say is I debated Bill Russell's spot so many times on this list, not at number 1, but it was as much as number 2 for me, for all the reasons you actually gave. I mean, and it would, again, if someone was to tell me, to reorder it slightly, I have no problem for me putting Russell on my list at number 2, because he is the ultimate winner, and you definitely bring up some excellent points. I noticed Kareem is not on your list though. That's interesting.
Yeah,
he's pretty decent. But anyways, the Jordan is, the reason I still have Jordan number 1, to me, you're right. I think Russell, he wins the most. There's no question about it. I think for me, Jordan is the best combination of accomplishments and statistical dominance and the eye, test, so to say, on the court. Russell, as good as he is, and I hate to use as many advanced metrics because I don't always think that tells the full story. He was only an 18.9 PER, so 19 PER. And he only shot 44% as a field goal percentage, and most of them were taken around the rim, and only had 56% from his free throw line. So there is some efficiency that he's not great at, where I look at Jordan as he is actually the most efficient player in all of NBA history. So I think the other thing I didn't mention that I also kind of hold in Kareem, and I know we're specifically more or less talking NBA, but it's hard to also ignore for Kareem, if we're talking just overall basketball, his complete dominance in college. He is without question the greatest player in college basketball history, and I don't think anybody debates it. So I think there's a little bit of that probably also boosts Kareem, but yeah. I have no problem if I was to move my list around. I totally could see Russell number 2 though. Russell is amazing, and I feel for whatever reason, he is sometimes this forgotten figure in the GOAT conversation. People quickly jump to LeBron, or I had said throwing Kareem in there, and occasionally get a couple Kobe, couple Magic's, couple other people in there. But yeah, for some reason, I don't know why Russell is just missed at times, and it's a travesty that he is. So, but yeah, I like your list though. You did say I would be surprised. I am a little, but in a very good way. I like that you have done Russell his due, because he's more than due something. So Bill Russell should definitely come on the show now with us. And and talk. But yeah, I liked your list a lot. There's very hard to like argue. Like I said, there's like the back and forth. Mine really is the only one is Jordan. I would never move, but a lot of your other stuff I could totally see shifting around a little because you make excellent points for all your guys.
Yeah, as you know, my play style is more like a team player on the court, so I kind of gravitate to those players. I think the only exception on my list would be you could argue that Kobe wasn't the best team player. Maybe even Jordan, but he
Mhm.
had the efficiency to back why he was making those shots.
Sure.
So my list might be more eccentric to those
I
players
get
that
that.
pass
Yeah.
more and make basketball moves. You know, Magic Irving has come out and said that if you want a player, like he's talking about the GOAT conversation, if you want a player to make a shot for you, you choose Michael Jordan. If you want the best team player, you choose LeBron James. And I think that's where I have LeBron the slight edge. It was tough for me to choose LeBron over MJ, honestly, based on all your reasons. But that's probably why I gave him the slight edge over Michael because of just his ability to make everyone around him better, be unselfish, and really play the game. He in my opinion, he's one of the only players that plays the game the way it should be from top to bottom. Now you could argue that he doesn't play defense that well, but don't look at his first year in LA. That's not fair. He wasn't there to try. He was there to just put people in the seats and do some highlights. And he wasn't trying to get hurt. So he's playing he was playing defense this season. He's always played defense in the finals, through the playoffs. One of the most famous blocks of all time was that one that he saved against Andre Iguodala, and then Kyrie hit that shot. But there was no shot for Kyrie if there was not a block from LeBron.
Sure.
So, and then kids, if I hear anyone say that the greatest of all time is Michael Jordan because he has the most rings, please do your research. Do
Do
not
math.
talk about rings solely because Bill Russell will always have the most rings for the
Right.
foreseeable future.
Yeah.
LeBron probably had the best chance, honestly, to hit that mark with the 8 consecutive finals trips. But as you could, that's so tough to hit. It's just insane. I don't
Yeah.
know if we'll ever see anybody
Yeah.
in our lifetime.
And honestly, I kind of hear you a little like on, I kept saying the eye test and you kind of like, look at, and sometimes it definitely comes down to like preference a little bit too, and I grew up, watching Michael Jordan, obviously there's no player like it. And then we move forward and Kobe's kind of that second coming. And, people do mention the whole killer instinct thing. And sometimes like I realize though, and I like that, but that might not always be someone's cup of tea. Someone may not like venture down like they like, oh, I like the silent Tim Duncan kind person, like was what someone else may say. Whereas like one of my all-time favorites, as you know, is Kevin Garnett. And I love like the insane intensity and things like that. So I also gravitate towards that personality of Jordan's. And the Last Dance documentary, and I hope you've all seen it. If you haven't, you got to watch it. It's just great insight. It's just good to watch. It's just fun, but it definitely has more insight to like that win at all costs Michael Jordan mentality. But and some people would say though, like LeBron's, does look to say like, let me get you more involved in a different way. I think he has a little bit more of like I would call it soft hand approach, which some players need. Whereas Michael Jordan really was just like, look, you're either going to come and win with me or you're like, or don't, or sit on the bench, let me do the work, that kind of thing. It doesn't work for everybody. So I totally see like where sometimes, I hear different players of the past or even current when they choose who the GOAT is. And some say, oh, it's Jordan for this, or it's LeBron for this, or Kobe for that. And sometimes it really comes down to, someone's preference or like, oh, I had to defend Kobe and, I got destroyed every single time. So if like, it just sometimes depends on a lot of people's perspective. So, but I definitely respect your perspective, although Jordan is number one. But yeah, no, honestly, it's definitely a difficult list. I think, to be honest, like if I were to trim mine down a little bit and slightly reorder it, I would still have my Jordan number one. This is like if I was like thinking I'm going to meet Scott halfway. I probably would have Russell number two and LeBron number three. If I was to think maybe I am going to boost Russell a few spots and take Kareem, down a notch maybe. where I would say our top three would be almost very similar. And if I were to say, like, for you and I to name like a top 8 to top 10, I would imagine 9 out of 10, if not all 10 of those players are probably the same. It's just slightly reordered. So, it's so hard when you get like in a certain spot, Magic, I think, is just such an amazing, captivating player that it hurt for me to first keep him off that 5. I went over statistical dominance of Wilt at that time, but like, it all depends what you like. I love a passer's game, so Magic is one of my all-time favorites.
Here's a question on Wilt: is does he have those numbers without Magic?
You mean Kareem?
They played it the other. Oh, I'm sorry, Kareem. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and right. And that's why I definitely didn't have him number 1. And you're right. And for that exact reason, as I didn't have him number 1, as you explained why Russell probably really should be higher. That's where I could kind of like say, like, maybe Kareem doesn't, maybe he edges down a little. Not that he was any worse of a player, but you're right. Those last bunch of years, Magic is totally coordinating and orchestrating that team. And you're right. If he's not getting fed a lot of those passes, not to say that Kareem would be a bad player, he'd still be a really good player, but may not have as many championships or MVPs for that matter.
All right.
So,
well, hey, I have no issues with your list. I wish you would see it a little more my way with MJ and LeBron, but
that's all
I don't
right.
think I'm going to change your mind. I think you need to put LeBron higher. For the reasons I gave.
You value second place more, and I value first place more. That's all it is.
You gotta you don't have a chance. But all right, folks. Well, that'll conclude our episode of Two Standard Individuals. Please like, comment, tell us your top 5.
Yeah,
and
definitely give us your list.
I'd be very interested to see everybody else's top 5.